Mark Bullock, BMA Biotech.
Thank you for joining us here on today's program. Let's start off by letting everybody know what BMA Biotech is. Describe your customers, your services, and what you guys are doing.
Okay, so BMA Biotech is a very multi-use company. So we not only design our own chemical products aimed at a wide cross-section of industries, we also have just branched out into offering environmental services for the oil and gas industry, specifically soil remediation and wastewater remediation after the event of a spill.
Soil remediation. Talk to me a little bit about that. When I think, of course, of words like is it how do you pronounce that again?
In situ.
Thank you, thank you. It's
In
been
situ.
it's been a long day of interviewing here, so I this is why I got to bring the experts on, so you guys can re-educate me at times. So, talk to me about those different types of soil remediations, if you would.
Okay, so in situ remediation basically refers to the treatment of contaminated soil in the place it occurred. So let's say, for instance, you had a burst pipeline and it covered an area of, say, I don't know, 60 square meters. So you wouldn't dig out the dirt. You would, in that sort of situation, you would use a similar method to actually fracking, where you would drill holes at various points throughout the contaminated area and inject down either a microbial product or an oxidization product, and then it would be pushed through the soil in the hopes that it would remove the contamination and bring it back up a secondary lot of shafts, so it can obviously then be removed and filtered out, and then the cleaner reused products be recirculated, and then obviously the contamination taken off and disposed of. Then the second type you've got is ex-situ remediation, which again is typically performed on site and is typically used with a chemical. So what they will do is they will mark off a contaminated area, and then they will bring in contamination mats, so they can put the contaminated soil onto the mats and either run the soil through a soil washing unit or actually wash it on the mats to remove the contamination. And then the other method is what's described as dig and haul. So what they will basically do is bring in trucks, fill them up with the contaminated soil and take them off to be treated or disposed of, and then clean soil will be brought onto site, and the hole will be then filled with the clean soil.
Talk to me about the environmental aspects of this. That's obviously something the oil and gas companies want to know about, whether it's the products that are environmentally safe or it's the process. I know at the end of the day, they just want to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So talk to me about the environmental side of this.
So the aim of remediation basically is to prevent secondary contamination, and what that refers to is, if you imagine when the soil gets wet, water will naturally absorb into the ground. The same happens with crude oil, E&P wastewater, or even petrochemicals. So what will happen is, as it absorbs into the ground, it will go down continually until it reaches either a layer that it can't penetrate, then it will then try and find a way around it, or will just go straight into what they call the groundwater source. Well, the groundwater source is what they're trying to prevent it getting into, because once it's in there, it will then leach out into surface water sources, into like rivers, lakes, even into the ocean. And obviously that's when you start to get your marine life being killed off, the ecosystems around the shorelines being destroyed. So that's the whole idea of remediation, is to stop the contamination from getting into those points with using products which, on the whole, if you use an oxidization method of in situ treatment, you also have to monitor the groundwater levels, because it can create toxic byproducts which can leach into the groundwater. So we tend to stay away from the oxidization process. We mainly focus on, if it's in situ, we will typically focus on microbial products, which we've designed ourselves. But if it's ex situ, we use a chemical wash. And in fact, when you use a chemical wash, it should never be used in situ, because you will get the same effect as if you're wetting the ground with rain. with water or anything, because it will just basically speed up the process of secondary contamination. So state laws and the environmental laws state it has to be remediated, which basically means cleaned up, not pushed deeper into the subsurface so it then can leach out into other sources.
I was going to ask you about the regulation side of things. Do you guys deal much with the regulators? So I know sometimes companies do, sometimes they don't. Depends on obviously the oil and gas midstream company that's being involved with it. Do you guys get much involved with that side of things, or do you just get the printouts of what the regulations are, and then your products and services just stay within there?
Well, but I mean, we have dealt with the regulators in the past, not just in the US, but in the UK and other parts of the world. And again, I mean, there is an overall federal regulation of what has to happen. And then again, each state will have their own guidelines on how it's to happen and what the background levels of contamination are, and the effective. I mean, like Texas, for instance, have deployed to the Railroad Commission for oil and gas sites. It's called Rule 91, and that basically outlines to prevent secondary contamination, the background levels they must be remediated to until it's classed as a passed site. And it also specifically states that when excavating contaminated soil and you're placing it into an area where it isn't contaminated, there has to be some form of a plastic sheet or some form of barrier to prevent the two soils interacting, because again, the contamination from the dirty soil will then leach into the clean soil, so then you're just basically spreading it around. There isn't any specific regulations on the products, because typically what you're going to be looking for is a company that knows what they're doing when it comes to remediation. Again, the remediation industry, like any other, has its good companies and its bad. And unfortunately, the bad ones are the ones that spoil it for the rest of us, because then everyone looks at us as that, we're just out to make a fast buck. When in fact, companies like mine and thousands of others in the US, deploy our products and our treatment methods that are effective. And then there are others that I've seen, companies do in-situ soil washing. It shouldn't happen. And if the state finds out about it, then they will start obviously bringing out the violation notices and start the process to start this company or whoever being fined, because there is a cradle to grave law when it comes to remediation, which basically states that whoever caused the contamination is responsible for that up until the point that it's actually remediated or destroyed. So even if it's secondary contamination that occurs in 3 years' time, the company that caused it is still liable for that contamination. There's actually a famous case in Houston that's currently going on where a former disposal site for actually industrial waste was being used. I don't know who purchased the site, but someone purchased the site and decided to build on it. When they started to remediate the site, they found that there was pits full of grease trap waste, completely different to the oil and gas industry, but still contains hydrocarbons. And the company actually started suing not only the outlets that generated the waste, but also the companies that disposed of the waste at that site. And the company that was actually meant to process the waste are the ones that are getting away with it all, because they are not covered by the cradle to grave law. So again, it's a very fine area when it comes to using the right product in the right setting, to achieve an outcome which is effective and long lasting, not just pushing it away so no one can see it anymore.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, is there a way that somebody knows the difference between in situ and ex situ when it comes to oil remediation? Or, is that something the experts come in for? Is there certain indicators on one? Because I know a lot of times it has to do with the method and the product. So how is each one customized? Or talk to me a little bit about how the determination is made.
So, basically, it all comes down to education. And if a company educates its staff on what to look for in respect to employing a remediation company, it's very, very easy to spot the people that are actually doing it wrong. Because if someone claims to you that their product does something that is scientifically impossible and physically improbable, it's easy to spot if you know what you're looking for. Because again, a lot of these companies that don't know what they're doing will use a lot of scientific jargon, which sounds right, but it isn't. But then it comes down to the companies themselves as well, the oil and gas companies, where if they were to train their staff, which we do actually offer staff training for all sectors of the oil and gas industry, in what remediation is, how to effectively achieve it, and the expectations of products, then that's where you start to cut out these companies that don't know what they're doing. But the telltale signs are, if someone's claiming that their product does X, Y, or Z in situ, go back and verify what they're saying. Literally Google what they're saying. Yes, you will hit their website, but you'll also hit research papers which states what they're saying is wrong. So the academic research will outweigh what they're saying, so then you can make up an informed decision of saying, well, they're actually lying to me, I'm not going to use them. Again, if they're claiming to use a chemical wash of any description, do not let it happen if it's in situ, because again, it's just going to be like you're pouring water on the ground. It's just going to saturate quicker down into the groundwater, and the secondary contamination is going to happen a lot faster. A lot of people do not like microbial products because there's a lot of bad PR about them, in the sense that they take so long to work or they don't work. Again, that all comes down to the company knowing what they're doing. If a company knows how to use the microbes, like our product, for instance, we've actually designed ourselves. It contains 5 different strains of bacteria, multiple spores, and even a fungi, which all aids in the effective rapid biodegradation of hydrocarbons, petrochemicals, anything that's related to the oil and gas industry. And you have to take into account the soil conditions, the pH levels, what soil type it is, and that's why you have to bring in companies who know what they're doing. And that's why when an environmental assessment is undertaken, you have to have what they call a competent person do this assessment, and typically there'll be an engineer or someone who's sat the approved courses by the state regulatory guidelines to obtain their licenses, so they will know how to effectively not only look at what's going on the site, but how to remediate it effectively and incorporate it into their plan, which will then obviously have to be submitted to the state, and then the state obviously sign off on it. But again, then it comes down to the company who have receiving the remediation plans to the oil and gas company to not just find the most cheapest option there is, because again, we're all in for cost saving, and yes, I agree there should be cost savings when it comes to remediation, because the cost of remediation can either be very expensive or very cheap. And the rule of thumb is with anything in life, the cheaper it is, the worse it's going to be. So if you find a company that can offer you a product and service, and there are thousands out there, it's just finding the right, finding the ones that are not in it for the money. Because what people don't realize is the companies that don't know what they're doing are making somewhere close to like an 80% markup on their products, because they're actually just a blend of surfactants or something which, when absorbed in more water, will split open and cause the contamination to reform. So that's the easiest way to try and spot what's going on, is do your own research, Google what they're saying, and then you'll find that quite quickly these companies will go out of business, because their claims then are rubbished purely on the grounds that there's academic research to say this product cannot do this, or this type of product cannot do that.
Well, I know that's been a problem down in the Permian as far as some of these, and I'll be honest, I've seen this environmental cleanup become pretty competitive, pretty I don't know if cutthroat is the right word, but almost. It just seems like there's more. I like to use the word chuck and jivers and exaggerators. It just seems like this is the vein, because you're dealing with like proprietary chemicals and you're dealing with one-of-a-kind solution type things. So people are going ahead and buying these proprietary franchise products and then just becoming a huge megaphone for them and not really caring about what they're saying. They're just saying what they want louder than anybody else. And so I do feel sorry for the oil and gas companies that fall for it. You know what I mean by that? I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice because a lot of these companies that I've been hearing about, they're still under investigation, so I don't want to mention any names.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it either and say, I know it's happening. I get the phone calls, I get the emails that this chemical cleanup industry is becoming extremely competitive, not only in the Permian, but in the Bakken and in the Eagle Ford. And I'm even here in Louisiana and even California a little bit. So it's I don't know if it's an elephant in the room, because I think people probably do you know what I mean by this? Because you're in it every day. So to you, it's probably normal. But for me, somebody who checks in with a lot of different industries and sub niches and that kind of thing, I'll tell you, the chemical cleanup business is very ultra competitive. Just talk to me about my comments.
Yeah, I mean, you are right, and unfortunately, it's a spreading epidemic we're now seeing with these. It's nothing more than snake oil, to be quite honest. And the joke of all this is, if these products were actually used in an ex-situ setting, a lot of them, they would actually be quite effective in their means. But then it comes down to these companies who really don't, these remediation companies who really don't care about what they're doing and have no clue how to do what they're doing, will dupe the customer into believing that they've got the next best thing or the silver bullet for remediation. And the way to look at it is like this. If a company is claiming something that a product can do wonderful, marvelous things, okay, always go back to the point of origin. How did it come about that this product could do that? Is there academic research on it? Is there anything published other than from this company that states this product can do this? For instance, all of my company's chemical products are based on what they call microemulsion formulations. So they are very good at encapsulating the oil because they're a blend of surfactants. We will never use them in situ, but another plus side of that is we have designed a new type of wash plant where we can push the product and the contaminated soil and the oil all through a wash plant, and out the other end we will get a separation of soil, the product, so it can be reused and circulated to wash more soil, and crude oil. So then we can then obviously send to the operator and say, right, you lost 75 barrels, for instance, but we've just recovered you 74 barrels. So again, it's all coming down to, listen to what these people are telling you. If they're telling you that microbes don't work, then get them to prove that, because there are countless thousands of studies that state microbes do work, but the company just needs to know what they're doing. If they don't know what they're doing, they won't work. That's as simple as it is. And again, fall back on education. My company offers education to oil and gas companies. We come in and we don't endorse our products, we don't push our products, we literally give people a better understanding of what remediation is, what an effective remediation program can do, and a realistic expectation of what products are able to achieve, without saying, use this or use that. Use any company you want, but just make sure that they are the right company and you're not going to be facing a severe fine at the end of all this because you've just contaminated a river or a lake. Because that's what's happening now. It's, it's not just in the US, it's, in the UK, it's in Europe, it's everywhere. It's an epidemic. And it's starting to spread a lot more because these sham technologies, most of them are actually developed in China, and no one really knows what's in them. So you're not just getting the secondary contamination from the products. Some of these products could be toxic, and that's the reality of it. It's, when exposed to heat or anything like that, it could be toxic. So it's not just emitting contamination from crude oil in there, for instance. It's also, causing toxic effects with what's in it.
What are some of the expectations that people should expect when it comes to after the job's done? I mean, is there any sort of follow-up that's done either on their side, your side, the state regulator side? You mentioned that they're going to be, their names attached to that cleanup job. So what type of follow-up and accountability, et cetera, is either done on your end or on somebody's end to make sure the job that you do is taken care of?
Typically, what happens is with a remediation project is the environmental assessment is key. And what that basically does is it covers looking at the area that's contaminated, getting the levels of contamination, and you actually produce what we call a contamination map. So it's a bit like a topographical map where you've got your contour lines, but instead of contour lines, it's just boundaries of the contamination. So then then the company and the state will know that in X area is, say, 10,000 TPH. Okay, in that case, then it has to be reduced back down to ground, what they call background levels, which is typically, state of Texas is 1% of soil content, soil weight. So then you'll then deploy an adequate product with an effective treatment, and then at the end of, if you're using a mix and till, for instance, what we tend to do, which is a fail-safe for everyone, is we will do it layer by layer like everyone else does it in situ. But we will take samples from not just the layer we're actually mixing and tilling, we're actually going to go down up to 3 feet in some cases, just so we can show to the client and the state that actually what we're doing isn't making it go deeper into the subsurface. We're actually remediating it as per state regulations. Again, because there is no guidelines on the sampling, there has to be samples taken, but there's no guidelines on how far down you have to go or how far across you have to go after, from the remediation site to prove that it's not happening anywhere else. And that's how a lot of these companies are getting in there, because there is no fail-safe. So if companies don't have that fail-safe, then it's quite easy to get literally, in trouble because of something that you've not done. And what people don't realize is the remediation company isn't at fault, because they are not the one that has caused the contamination. It's actually the company that owns the pipeline or leases the pipeline, whatever, or if a storage tank ruptures on a tank battery or wherever, it's not the remediation company that's going to be at fault. It is going to be the customer who either owns or leases that land or whatever, not the remediator. So they really don't care, because they get away scot-free. I mean, I've heard instances where, clients who have come to me and said, hey, I've got the state on my back because I've used this company. Can you come in and sort it out? Well, yeah, we can come in and sort it out, but it's going to cost you now 3 times the amount, because not only have we got to clean up the initial contamination, we've also got to assess the whole area again to see how bad the contamination has been made. Have they used any compounds that are toxic? Then do we have to remediate that? And it's just a whole fiasco where it's better to pay, for instance, $100,000 in the first instance than it is to pay $30,000, because what you're going to get is that $30,000 you initially paid is going to go somewhere close to $400,000 by the time you're finished.
Talking with Mark Bullock, BMA Biotech. A little bit about the 2 different types of soil remediation products that they're using in the oil and gas contamination niche side of I call it the upstream, downstream, salmon stream, midstream, all the different streams involved with the oil and gas industry. That's kind of what we're primarily talking about here, right? This is 2 different types of soil remediation products and how you guys are solving all the oil and gas contamination problems, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. I wanted to, good, because I just wanted to, I'm making sure I'm following my own interview here. I just wanted to also ask you, are you guys just in the oil and gas, or, I'll give you an opportunity, we'll plug outside of this a little bit. Are you doing any sort of other cleanups, whether it be construction sites or, agriculture or anything like that? Or is it just right now we're laser focused on oil and gas because that's where our services are needed the most? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically we are laser focused on oil and gas, because as you said, that is where our services are needed the most at the moment, and that is also where our experience lies, is with the oil and gas industry. In time, yes, we may expand out into other industries, but our product range outside of the environmental services side does cover other industries, because that's on the chemical side, and we do a range of wastewater treatment products for various sectors of the industries, municipalities, restaurants for grease traps and stuff like that. But primarily now we are focusing on oil and gas for the environmental services, because that's where we're needed.
Okay. Yeah, then we'll make sure we stick on that then. We don't need to be plugging those other areas, because I know you guys, you've got a lot of different services and that type of thing. So, but for this, we're going to focus on the oil and gas, the spills, the in-situ, the ex-situ remediation. Is there anything you want to tell me about maybe the products that you guys use? I know we talked about the competitive side and everything else, but just take an opportunity, explain why yours is better than 10 Super Bowls. I know you don't like to brag a little bit, but take the opportunity and really, maybe explain some of the features or the advantages that, that you guys are bringing that no one else is.
Okay, so I'll start with the chemical product. So that is a unique product to the industry in a sense, because we are the only one that actually has a product, because again, all of our products are designed by us. Our research teams are not just scientists. We actually bring in engineers. We bring in geologists. We bring in the people that actually deal on the ground with various situations. So our scientists will sit there and speak to them and say, right, you tell me the problems you've got, and I will try and design the product around those problems. So one problem that we found with the chemical side was, people were saying that it can be expensive for soil washing. So is there a way we could, perhaps speed up the process of, maybe reusing some of the product or something like that? And that's what we do is, on the chemical side, our ex-situ soil wash, because again, as I said before, never to do in-situ chemical washing, soil washing, because it just doesn't work. Well, it does, but it just pushes it down. So what we do is we, in a sense, mix it into a slurry. We put it through a special machine that we've developed ourselves. And again, it's not something that we've sort of built from scratch. We've looked around at other industries to see what machinery is out there and we can utilize, and just basically pull it together. In a sense, I think some people call it in the US MacGyvering. So we've MacGyvered this machine together, which will separate out crude oil, soil, and our product. And what we then do is, obviously, if the client can obviously have their crude oil back if they so wish, or we can take it and find a buyer for it, because again, it can be resold because it's still a commercial commodity. Because the BS&W content, again, because of the machine we're using, is reduced down to less than 1%. The soil then is expelled on a different side, still on containment mats. Then at each section we will take a soil sample and have it analysed to make sure that that soil is within the background contamination limits. And then the product is then recirculated back through to the wash plant and reused up to 4 times. Then once we get to the 4th time, we obviously then change the IBC out and put on a new one, because our product is now getting less effective. But then our microbial product is something which is probably one of the most modernist in the industry, because what we saw when we first looked at bioremediation, as that's what it's termed under, the microbial products were maybe ones, either bacillus or with 3 or 4 spores in there, or bacillus were mixed in with enterobacter. So it was doing a job, but it hadn't changed much since bioremediation was first recorded as being used for the oil and gas industry back on I think it was the Exxon Valdez oil spill up in Alaska back in the late 80s. So a lot of companies were still basing their products, their microbial products on that. But then we're also seeing where other companies were putting vitamins and this, that, and all the other in there. And genuinely, they were doing nothing. It was just the bacteria were the things that were working. So we looked at what bacteria there was within the natural environment that is known for digesting bacteria and turning it into water and carbon dioxide. It's just like we eat food, they eat crude oil or petrochemicals or whatever. So we isolated these strains. We then farmed them. In fact, one of the strains comes from an oil well because it was causing problems. So we figured, we basically farmed that. And it's very effective at eating the long, more complex hydrocarbon chains. And again, because that's what we're also seeing, was you would get a rapid decrease of contamination, say 60% in the first 30 days. But then you would have a long, drawn-out treatment process because the lighter chain hydrocarbons are gone. The short chains hydrocarbons are gone, where the longer, more complex chains were left, and it was harder for the bacteria to digest. So we had found strains that weren't just good at doing the easier parts of contamination to digest that. We also incorporated strains which could effectively use the more complex chains as a food source. But in general, within the industry, there are a lot of microbial-based products or oxidizers or chemicals, but we just stick to our 2 that we've developed and designed, because we know they're effective and they work and they save the client money.
So somebody's listening right now, they got an oil spill. I get press releases every day about some saltwater spill, some oil spill, number of different things happen, from what is it? Winkler County to Morton County, North Dakota. So from the
Yep.
Permian to the Bakken, they happen all the time. I imagine you guys just like it when people call you because or let you know, because every job is different. But
Yep.
what should somebody get in touch with you? They call you, they send you an email. If somebody has some questions about spill prevention or spill reaction, that type of stuff, how do they get in touch with you? What should they? Who's your customer? That sort of thing. Talk to me about that.
So again, our customer is all across the oil and gas industry in the upstream, midstream, and downstream sector. Wherever there's a possibility of a spill or any type of oil and gas contamination, as we call it. So what would generally happen is people could contact us over our email or phone us up, and then obviously from there we obviously talk. We find out what's going on, because that's the easiest thing to do. What's gone on and how much, if they know how much has been spilled. If it's a minor spill of, say, 20 barrels and it's up in the Bakken, I mean, that is, the other end country for us. However, we do have inroads to other companies that we know and trust in the region that we can obviously refer the work to. Or if it's a much larger spill and the client's willing to pay for us to actually go there, we will, react to the spill. And then, but then again, on top of that, we also offer, as I said, educational services to companies where we will go in and we'll educate their staff in, spill prevention, as you pointed out, and not just spill prevention, but, how to contain the spill if need to be. And again, we have containment products as well, which we use a third-party distributor for those, because we don't do any spill containment. And it's as simple as that. I mean, they just either phone or email us, and we basically, if we can, if they're willing to pay the money and we're willing to, make it cost effective from the beginning, and that's what it all comes down to, is if it's too costly for a client, we will say, well, you're 1,000 miles away from us, but we know of this company, or we've got inroads to this company who can actually cover that area for us. In time, we are going to expand out, obviously, all across the US, but at the moment, we're primarily focused on the Eagle Ford and the Permian, because that's where, obviously, we're located in between in Texas. So, yeah, it all comes down to, if they're willing to pay the money, basically, we will attend the spill.
Wrapping up here, Mark Bullock with BMA Biotech. They're laser focused on the oil and gas industry right now with their oil spill remediation. Just kind of final thoughts. Anything that we left out? Anything that you want to reiterate? I like to give guests the final word. That way the question and framework is not done by me. So, and who knows, maybe you got a good chili recipe. I don't know. But the floor is yours, sir.
No, I certainly don't have a good chili recipe. But again, I'd say if anyone wants either our services for either initial site environmental services to look at the, cleaning up their spill, we offer those. We also offer services to remediate the spill. And we also offer educational services to oil and gas companies, where we will go in and train their staff on, basically what to look for in remediation, what to expect of various products, and how to prevent using the companies that really honestly don't know what they're doing. If anyone would like to get in touch with us to speak about their remediation needs or education programs we offer, they can call us at 281-643-8860, or they can email us at info@bmabiotech.com, or they can go to our website and use our contact us link.